Thanks everyone for joining us. We're from Barracuda. We're going to talk about managing costs. If you came here to hear about managing costs with tiered storage, we will talk about that, but it's not the only knob that we're using. So we're going to give you a little bit more than you bargained for today. All right, I just want to start off by giving you an idea of who we are. I'm Dave Farrow, Senior Director of Information Security. This is Chris Sutton. You want to introduce yourself?
I work on the network security side.
And we're part of the Barracuda Security Team. We're responsible for our network security policy, our network security, application security, vulnerability management, incident response. We recently changed the tagline for our company to Your Journey Secured. And today we want to talk about a part of our journey secured and how Sumo played a big part in that. Today we're going to cover a couple of things. First, we're going to talk about a method for escaping analysis paralysis when beginning a centralized logging project. Now, if you're here and you've been a Sumo user for a long time and you're already well established, this may not be the right talk for you, but if you're starting your Sumo journey or you're contemplating starting your Sumo journey, our story, I hope, is going to really resonate with you. We're also going to talk about a method for organizing your logging data so you can support chargebacks, which is a key part of managing our costs. And then we're also going to talk about some methods for identifying and managing our ingest budget issues. And we're going to talk about some of the challenges that we ran into and how we've addressed that with Sumo's help. So I want to start by just giving an overview of our journey. We started back in 2004 with the Barracuda Spam and Virus Firewall. Have any of you heard of that? Ever went to an airport and seen our slide? All right. Well, today, we're actually a SaaS provider that provides solutions for network and application security. We provide solutions for email protection and data protection. We still sell the appliances. We still sell virtual appliances, but we really are a cloud company, and Sumo has been a big part of that. One of our recent assignments was, as we really pushed into the cloud, was to establish centralized security logging, and we were tasked with doing that at cloud speed. Now, it's kind of a catchphrase these days, but what that meant for us was we needed to keep up with our development teams that we were rapidly pushing in a lot of different directions into a lot of different clouds. And we needed to get centralized logging in place, in pace with them, and we needed to do that with a constant cost. And Sumo helped us get there. So it might help to understand, you might think, why did you need centralized logging this far into your history? Right? And it makes some sense for us, and if you were a company that was born before the cloud era like we were, the journey probably is going to sound familiar to you. In 2004, we started out with the Spam Virus Firewall, and over the next 5 years, we added a list of additional products and became really an IT technology portfolio shop. But all of it was appliances. And we became the largest purpose-built appliance company in the world. What did that mean for logging and monitoring? Well, when you sell an appliance product, that product ends up in your customer's network, and the logging problem is theirs, and the monitoring problem is theirs. So we had a small set of internal systems that we needed to monitor, and given that they were a small set of systems, the system owners were responsible for any type of security investigations or operational investigations. And so, the game of whack-a-mole was very simple. There were only a couple of moles out in the field. Over the next 5 years, we started making inroads into the cloud world. I actually became part of Barracuda back in 2008 with the purchase of some backup technology that became part of our backup service, which was our first cloud offering. And we extended that over the next 5 years with other cloud services that moved into the cloud and some that were native cloud applications from the beginning. And in that period, we developed a large private cloud. And we started to gather SOC 2 certifications. SOC 2 is important for this topic because when you do your SOC 2 audit investigate or reports, one of the big questions they ask is, do you have centralized logging? Are any of you guys pursuing SOC 2 reports or needing to maintain them right now? Okay. So Sumo was a big help in that process for us. What that meant for us is that we ended up with really a loose federation of independent states that were responsible for their own logging and monitoring. We had a lot of collaboration and cooperation across teams, but we also had a proliferation of tools and processes. These teams have been empowered throughout the years to deliver business value on their own sort of recognizance. And as a result, we end up with a lot of moles out in the field to play whack-a-mole with, and investigations became increasingly difficult. In the last 5 years, we've pushed into a lot of pure cloud services, and importantly, we've moved largely into the public cloud, and our SOC 2 report needs have expanded, and as a result, it became clear that the whack-a-mole approach with siloed systems wasn't going to help us. We actually needed a centralized logging and monitoring solution so that we could effectively do investigations of security and operational incidents. And when we recognized that we needed that central solution, we couldn't wait. So what happened? This is where we talk about the analysis paralysis problem. Right? When we were given the assignment to put the centralized logging in place, we asked ourselves, what do we need to gather? Followed by, what do we have to gather? You know, when you have a lot of siloed systems, it's hard to get an accurate inventory of all the data sources that are available to you. And it's hard to identify what it's going to cost. And what we determined was that if we were to step back and do an exhaustive analysis of the answers to these 3 questions, we would take an arbitrarily long period of time because the environment would continue to move out from under us, right? So we were facing a pretty substantial analysis paralysis issue. What did we do? Well, we just decided to roll up our sleeves and get started. All right, we decided on a budget that we thought would be good enough to start, and that we would start pulling data in and see what value we could derive from it, and then determine where we needed to go from there. We took a 3-prong approach to this. We started by collecting data from as many different sources as possible. We went wide as quickly as we could in our budget, and then our plan was to analyze that data, identify the data that was giving us value, and then refine it by pruning from that data set the things that weren't giving us a lot of good actionable intelligence. Chris is the guy on the team that's responsible for doing that. And so I want to have Chris talk a little bit about how we approach this problem. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, so again, we started with auth logs, audit D logs, Windows event logs, so we were covering Active Directory. We ended up expanding into application logs for product teams, application audit logs so they can handle metrics and see how their product was working. Pretty quickly we ended up hitting our budget, as I think most people will probably run into. And so one of the things we ended up having to manage was how do we, manage cost, was it buybacks or like chargebacks? And so, one of the things that became pretty clear is we have to manage not just making sure we're under budget, but who is actually being attributed to the data in our budget. One of the great things is we were working with professional services when we began, and they emphasized that in categorizing our data, right? So source category, one of the things we did is we made sure at the beginning everything had the product team or the group in which the data was attributed to. And that's a big key factor. One of the things that Sumo Logic, you can go to the next slide. One of the things that Sumo Logic did is they have a great dashboard, right, that for managing costs that shows what sources, what categories are providing a lot of information into your budget, and where that data is coming from, but it doesn't tell it based off of group. And so we ended up leveraging the Sumo Logic Volume Index, which stores all this data to determine what group was sending too much data, what data, and basically leveraging that for chargebacks within the groups. Next one. And so this is the standardized dashboard that Sumo Logic has. As you can see, it's meant for collectors and sources, but not based off of groups. And so what we ended up doing is changing the standard searches that are provided here and modifying that to represent groups. It's pretty simple. All that's based off of source category, the way we ended up doing it. And hats off to the Sumo Logic services, professional services, because they're the ones who helped us steer us down that path. And so one of the things we ended up doing is basically creating alerts that helped us determine when that happened, if a product team was going over their budget, We ended up averaging that over the last 7 days instead of 24 hours. Otherwise, we'd get kind of noisy. And then, yeah, so that ended up being very useful.
Let me back up, sorry. So yeah, one of the first things that fell out of that is that by being able to roll the usage analytics or the ingest analytics up by the first element of the source category, we were able to quickly identify the teams that were using the most data in our budget. And we were able to focus our analysis on those. And there were a couple right off the bat that were clearly not addressing our primary use case. Right? Our primary use case in rolling this out was for security monitoring and logging. And like I said, a lot of our teams looked at this and said, wait a minute, we don't have to manage our own elk stack anymore, right? Or we don't have to pay for Logly out of our budget. Let's jump onto this platform and let's use this as well. We turned back around and said, hey guys, you're using a significant portion of our budget. Do you know what you're planning to use it for yet? And a lot of times their answer was, we don't really. And so knob number one that we used was the tiered storage option at in Sumo, where we said, let's take your logs and take them out of the continuous tier, move them down to the frequent tier to buy us some time to actually sort out what we need to be gathering and how much we really need to budget to accommodate your use cases. Now, taking things out of the continuous tier and into the frequent tier just means that you can't live tail the logs, you can't alert on the logs, you can't create dashboards with them, but you can still do all the same searching in them, right? So for a prototyping and a POC perspective, it was really helpful in getting the teams oriented to the power of the tool and what they could get out of it while they really sorted out where do we actually want to apply Sumo at the continuous tier. And we've actually seen them start creeping back into the continuous tier as they've answered those questions.
Yep.
So once we sort of got the big rocks out of the way and got them into a lower tier of storage, we went to the next stage, which is looking for value within the data we were gathering.
Yeah, and so what we found is within our security logs, we did end up finding trace messages, and application logs, so RSD, that's a proprietary service of ours. Next slide.
Pardon me?
Next slide.
Actually, I want to cover one thing about that. When we went and found the email security stuff, the email security messages and logs, that turned out to be a configuration error in syslog on their side. And the reason that was a problem for us is we as a security team operate the Sumo instance, but we don't necessarily have control over the deployment of these applications and services. So we have to coordinate with the operations team to fix that configuration, and the email team did that, and everything was great. But what happened with the RSD team?
The RSD logs, we talked to the ops team. They changed the configuration to where they weren't being sent, and probably a week or two down the road, regression happened and they started getting sent again. So instead of working with them, I mean, we worked with them to get it removed, but to prevent it in the future, we also ended up setting up ingestion filters to just rip them out. So if it happened again, we wouldn't even see it.
Right. So there are these great preventative defensive measures you can take in the event that there are regressions introduced by other teams. And that way we don't have to interrupt the development cycle to tear those out in order to defend our budget. We also found numerous cases of logs that add little value. Can you talk a little bit about how you go searching for the high volume logs and deciding what's valuable and what's not?
Yeah, so one of the things we end up doing is when we do see high ingestion rates, or even when we're onboarding teams, we end up passing most of those logs through log reduce. And what that does, it just categorizes the logs and brings the more verbose logs generally up to the front, and easily determine if it's a category we want to keep or if we want to ignore it. Is it audit logs? It's an easy way of determining how you want to parse the logs.
Right. And those things become candidates for additional filters, ingest filters, or maybe we might find that there's enough volume there that we might need to split that source out and put it on a different tier of storage. But log reduce has been one of the key tools that we've used. The cool thing is we also found in the process, like I said, we went into this project trying to catch up with our teams that were moving at really quick paces. We also found as we began onboarding teams that we found things that were broken we didn't expect to find.
Yeah, so one of the things I found really useful is as we're onboarding product teams, as we get data in, I just create simple dashboards for them. It gives them an idea of how to parse their data since they're not familiar with Sumo Logic, and it also gives them immediate insight into their data. One of the things we found as we were onboarding one of the teams is that they were actually having a partial outage at that time. And so we brought that to their attention. They ended up correcting the issue that they weren't even aware of at the time.
Right. Yeah, and that's one of the things that's been a real serendipity about being a Sumo customer. In all honesty, we went to our guidance committee saying we want to buy Logarithm, and someone on our guidance committee said, hey, have you considered Sumo? You can actually apply Sumo in a lot more ways than you can just a pure security solution. And this slide really attests to the fact that we've derived value from this investment above and beyond just our security story, which has been, so much win. So we have 3 primary knobs for dealing with refining our data so that we can protect our budget. And by the way, I stopped by and talked with one of our sales guys because I don't know what you guys heard Ramin saying, but I heard Ramin saying that basically everything's free and that this talk doesn't really matter because overages are a thing of the past. It turns out that the story is a little bit more complicated than that. All right. The knobs that we have here are still knobs that are important to understand that we're going to continue to use, right? The storage tiers are still an important knob. If you don't know whether the data needs to be looked at in real time, if you need some time with the data, you can move it off to a lower cost storage tier for the time being. You can use Ingest Filters to protect yourself from misconfigurations or verbose logs without having to disrupt your development teams. We're just starting to move into using ingest budgets so that the recidivists who don't do what we ask and continue to shovel stuff at us will get rate limited at their own collectors. All right, so there are a lot of these great knobs. And what I was really excited about to hear about when I talked with Jim about what Ramin meant was that from my understanding of this new pricing model, we'll be able to much more easily move things between the continuous tier and the storage tier without having to have a sales call to say, hey, we need to change our mix. With a credit model, we'll be able to make those decisions, we'll be able to make those changes in the platform, and we'll be able to pack down the data in our Sumo instance, make room for new stuff, and really drive up the value of the data that's in our data store. So with those knobs, we have been able, with our original budget, to add in a number of new acquisitions, a number of new internally developed products, and we still have room to bring in more. We've got room to pack this stuff down. So if you remember, I started at the beginning saying that we were facing some significant analysis paralysis. We were able to roll our sleeves up, take a reasonably small budget, make an impact, all right? And the way that I see this going for us at Barracuda is just like everything else I've done at Barracuda. We get a small investment up front, we come back showing value, all right? Then there's room to make more investment. So this idea of incremental steps in developing value for the business is a part of our core culture. And Sumo has helped us generate value for our security program and for our operational program with a small baby step. And we're really excited about the help that you've given us, and we see a lot of opportunity in the future to continue to drive value. Last words here. We got the centralized security logging. We got it as quickly as we needed it. We didn't need to know everything up front. And Sumo has been a key partner in helping us develop or to be effective in our mission and to stay on budget. So we got that said with 15 seconds left on our budget. Woo! Does anyone have any questions? There's a microphone coming.
Check. All right. So you're obviously making heavy use of ingest filters. Can you kind of give me a feel for how extensive it is? We've sort of avoided them because
I can't hear a word he's saying.
We don't have speaker. We don't have earphones in, so I can't hear you. Yeah.
So we try and avoid it as well, right? The net result is we try and avoid it at all costs.
Hold up a second. Just for the recording, did everybody in the audience hear the question? Okay.
It's the last ditch effort, right? And so we're kind of in the same boat. We try and do it in configuration. So say you're sending logs via syslog or application logs. We try and only send the pertinent data, the actionable data that we want to do analytics on. Sometimes that doesn't happen. So
Yeah, it's really a defensive measure when the other measures don't work, and it's a quick solution as well.
yes.
Hi. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Now?
Yes.
Oh, great. Oh, you fixed it. Thanks. Okay. Hi, my name is Lisa. So you mentioned that you use log reduce to pass your logs through so that you can sort of filter what's valuable and what's not. Can you speak a little bit more on that? I've actually never heard of that in general, of using log reduce.
Yeah, log reduce is just a built-in function within Sumo Logic. It's part of the searching. So when you search, there's even a button on the search page for log reduce prior to aggregation, and you can do a log reduce at the end. And the big thing that it does is it categorizes your logs, and so think of it as sorting your logs based off of, I think it's based off of text criteria. So if something starts with, a service as the process, it'll try and group all those together. If something is logins, it'll group all those together. And so it's just a quick way of analyzing your logs.
Right. So one of the things that it does is, the idea is when you're trying to prune out stuff that isn't adding value, you're going to get the most bang for your buck with messages that are repetitive, right? And log reduce will bubble repetitive stuff up to the top, so you can look at that thing that's being repeated a lot and decide, is this valuable or is it not? So really the value is that it identifies things that are happening a bunch of times, so that if you suppress that, you're going to see a large commensurate reduction in volume.
All right.
Hi. So what sort of data were you able to move to your frequent tier of storage?
Well, because we're security guys, we shoved a whole bunch of application stuff off, right? So all the application tracing was not part of our initial mission, right? And the message was, hey guys, this is a really cool tool. We think this is fantastic. Get your own budget. But because there are synergies and there are things in that data that we want to look at and get as well, we were good corporate citizens. We were trying to get them on the Sumo crack, right? And so we managed some costs by giving them a place to play. But they have since gone back and said, hey, we're gonna work out figuring out our own budget for this as well. But the key break point for us was application data versus security specific stuff. So the contract we have with our development teams is, if you can prove to me that this is security related data, even if it's like audit logs from your application, I will totally take that in my budget. But if it's outside of that, I need you to get your own. So that was how we thought about it.
Thank you. Yes, so that's the end of the first session. We'll be having a second talk by Cal Patel from Genesis starting in about 2 minutes.
Thanks.
Thank you.